You're tuned to The Drive on your 24/7 home of the black and gold. Steelers Nation Radio.
Good afternoon, Steelers Nation, and welcome to a special edition of The Drive here on the Steelers Audio Network. Wes Uhler, Matt Williamson with you as we get ready for the introduction of the Pittsburgh Steelers' 17th head coach in franchise history, Mike McCarthy. He is taking the podium now, along with, of course, team president Art Rooney II and general manager Omar Khan. And as soon as Nathan gives me the hello or the thumbs up, we'll be on the way there, Matt. But here we go. It's becoming officially official right here, right now.
Yeah, big stuff. I mean, historical stuff. I mean, especially after Tomlin was here as long as he was. Big news. We got that going. All right.
Let's go to the podium now to Art Rooney II.
All right, good afternoon. Thanks, everybody, for being with us on this special occasion. It may be irrelevant to some of you, but I like the fact that today is my grandfather's birthday, and he would have loved the fact that we're hiring a guy from Greenfield to be our coach. So, but having said that, him being from Greenfield had little to do with our decision here. It's really great to be able to hire somebody who has such a tremendous winning track record and won everywhere he's been, and so it gives us great confidence to welcome Mike. And so I am happy to introduce Mike McCarthy, the next head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Mike.
All right, here we go. Thank you, Art. I think I thought at least be able to get started. Oftentimes coaches and players, you put on new team colors, and it takes a minute to feel comfortable in those new colors. But to be blessed beyond any measure, one day to put on the colors you wore since you brought home. I apologize. Brett, I told you not to sit my family down here in front. This is so unfair. When you come home from Mercy Hospital, I do want to thank Art Rooney, Omar Khan, Dan Rooney, and the entire Steelers organization for the trust they placed in me to represent one of the most storied franchise in all of sports. I understand and embrace the responsibility, the privilege, and the weight that comes with this stewardship. This city, this franchise, this fan base means the world to me because Pittsburgh's my world, and it's just awesome to be back here. I do want to thank two men I'm very fortunate to call friends, Mike Tomlin and Bill Cowher. They've represented this organization with such class, and I'm honored to follow in their footsteps. They left the proverbial cupboard full, for sure. My family, my loves, my wife Jessica, kids Alex and Danny, Jack, George, Gabby, and Izzy, my parents, Joe and Ellen McCarthy, my sisters, Kelly, Ellen, and Colleen, and the crew that's here. We can finally openly wear our Steelers swag, so let's get it. My heart is full, my focus is singular, and it's time to bring another championship back to this great city. And with that, I just want to make sure that when we do get that trophy, that the 7th trophy in the case, we'll start that victory parade at 1137 Greenfield Avenue. So with that, Bert.
All right, if you guys want to raise your hand. Pass the mics over.
Mike, Jerry Dulac from the Post-Gazette. Did you think and want to get back into coaching? And we've seen other guys take that year off and get back. What did last year or the year off do for you, show you, anything like that?
Well, the year off was awesome. Really family. I had a chance to take a year off in 19, and frankly, I really didn't take the year off. I just, we had a group of coaches, friends mainly, that we really treated it like a season. We started in February, and still today there's projects that I never really got to in Dallas. So I mean, it was a football deep dive on a lot of things. It was awesome. I loved it. Just to do it at that pace and do it with the people that I did experience that with. But this year was about family. I spent a lot of time with the family through the spring volleyball games, all that stuff. It was, I don't know why I'm so emotional, but Great year. I had a great year. So, and then was able to do some cool things too. You know, I mean, the Pat McAfee show was awesome. Just to see that side of the world, have more respect for you, Jerry, than I ever have, just because, I just see how hard you guys work. But no, it was just a very fulfilling year, and frankly went too fast because once football season gets in, really once training camp hits, we all have that clock, so to be able to start have conversations and watch certain things. I just didn't do as much this past year as I did, back in 19. But it was really cool to, step back and look at the trends. I think our game's so much about trends. I'm just always amazed when you look at a season, whether you're following game management, you're following fundamentals. If you see the ball kicked out at the 1 yard line in one game, and it's amazing. 3 more happen in the next 3 weeks. So I just always have followed the trends because I think our game's about trends, and it is our responsibility as coaches to make sure we're constantly teaching and reinforcing and finding new examples for that. So it was a great year.
Just for media too, when you're asked a question, raise your hand so they can see in the crowd where you're coming from. Go ahead.
Mike, Tim Benz over here from Trib Live. Question, just a football one for you. I'm not asking this from any other perspective except your own personal preference. In your best case scenario, do you want Aaron Rodgers back as your quarterback next year?
That's nice the way he asked that, right? That was slick. But I mean, definitely. I mean, I don't see why you wouldn't. But I think just like anything, knowing Aaron long enough, going through seasons, I think when players, to see Mel Blunt here, I mean, when guys are up at that stage of their career, they need to step away and decompress. I think that's very important. The game is so emotional, what these men commit to and what they put into it. I think that time away is important, and I have spoken to Aaron, and so that's really where we are there. But I was able to sit back and watch the games. I watched most of the Pittsburgh games on TV, and I thought he was a great asset for the team.
Rich Walsh, KDK TV. Mike, credentials aside, did you feel like you had to sell yourself in that interview? And was there any answer or story that you told that maybe helped get you the job?
Well,
share with us?
I think, every time you had a chance to interview, I've always enjoyed the interview process. Frankly, was on 3 this year, had a number in 19, and really didn't have many before that, frankly. I think anytime coaches and players have a chance to talk football, sit down and cross the table and, have a chance to sit down and talk to Art Rooney, about the game, the history, especially growing up here and being a huge Steeler fan as a kid and understand. I mean, it's a great opportunity. So I'm filibustering here because I'm trying to think of a good story to give you, but I don't think there was one that knocked it out of the park. But no, I just I enjoyed those conversations and I notice no different than I would think in any industry. You look for fit. I'm in the process of putting together a coaching staff, and there's so many outstanding coaches out there that I respect, but it has to fit together. So I did feel very comfortable, from the moment that I was able to sit down with Art and Omar, and that's a connection I know where I am in my life and in my career. The GM head coach relationship's critical. And I couldn't be paired with a better guy.
Bo Marchant with College of Pro. Michael, this question's for you.
Yeah. I got him. Yep.
This question's for you. In terms of absent of being a Pittsburgh guy yourself, but when you looked at the roster specifically, what attracted you most to the roster, and what are you happiest with in terms of the roster?
Oh, I mean, I love the roster, and I think it's Omar's turn to talk here, but I think it's a roster that it's fluid. And what I mean by that, the first thing I always look for, I know in my head coaching years, how many players do we have returning on contract? Or we had 52, we had 61, 64, because frankly, I mean, the draft's really important. Veteran free agency is important. But that group of men in these off-season programs, particularly just being older, being in the league, that time you have together, those men will move the needle more, in my opinion, more than anybody else, and it's a great group of men, just based off the feedback that we all talk to each other, and so I'm really looking forward to moving the needle with those guys, and definitely we'll add through free agency, we'll add through the draft, but it's like I said, Mike Tomlin, and Omar, they've left me a lot to work with. So I feel good about the direction. I'm really excited about the defense. Great seeing Alex here because defense wins championships. And the history of the Steelers defense and staying with the 3-4 is important. As far as the origin of it, and that's something we have to build off. I've been a head coach 18 years. I've had one top 5 defense, and we won a Super Bowl that year. So the importance of defense is critical.
Mike, Brooke Pryor, ESPN. The last 3 guys that had this job were in it for 19 years, 15 years, 23 years. You're a little bit more advanced in your career than they were when they took over, but how long do you see yourself continuing to coach? What do you kind of view this timeline as?
Well, I think we're going to shift to dog years, number one. So it shouldn't be funny in your first press conference. That backfired on me last time. But so, no, I think really, Coach Noel, growing up in the 70s, I just, when I got into coaching, that's when you look at someone you like to emulate. And what Bill Cowher and Mike Tomlin have done here, trust me, I have great respect for that. But I really am. Hell, I can't even get through the press conference. I'm looking forward to getting started tomorrow. And, this game is about winning, and the game has changed. My first year in the NFL was 1993. And the rules have changed. The way you train your team has changed. So those are things I'm focused on. I hope it lasts a very long time.
Mike, Teresa Varley from Steelers.com. Mike, I wanted to ask you, what was that like after you got the phone call from the Steelers to be able to call your parents and share that news with them?
See, no, that's not fair, Teresa. Yes, no, it was a great phone call. I couldn't get through the introduction, so I think you know how that went. So.
Hey, Mike, Will Graves with the AP. Why did you still want to coach? What is it about this profession, that certainly you have great credentials, you have coached a good long time. Some guys don't come back at 62. Not that that's not as old as it used to be, but what keeps you coming back? What made you want to get back into coaching?
I love coaching. I think the biggest thing is the interaction every day with the players, the coaches, the support group. To line up every single day and to work and to do hard stuff, with people that are committed. There's nothing like it. And, I've had a chance to step away and look at other things. There's nothing like the National Football League, and to do it at the highest level, it's something that, I'm not ready to walk away from, and to have this opportunity, it just seemed like it was meant to be, on so many different levels. But Sundays are incredible, but, Tuesdays, game plan days is still one of my favorite days, so there's so many little things about the coaching profession that I love. But, the fact of, getting up every day, grabbing that cup of coffee and hitting it, getting it, and it's all about winning. So, I'm just fortunate that I had the opportunity to do it again.
Mike Pursuta, DVE. Your history is offense, your reputation's offense, your numbers support that. What has been transferable from one stop to the next? Why do you keep getting production and getting the most out of quarterbacks?
Well, the quarterback opportunity, I think it's important. When you become a head coach, a big part of why you got that first opportunity was, the position you coached through your background and so forth. So I've been super blessed to work with unbelievable group of quarterbacks, the Hall of Famers. Paul Hackett was my mentor. Paul taught me the quarterback position. Started at University of Pittsburgh over there in 1989. So just had great mentorship, through my younger years. But in that follows through. A little harder to coach the quarterback today than it was in pre-2011. But that position is no different than any other position. The quarterback position to me is a huge challenge because you don't have the individual time that the other positions have. So, but really finding time, being efficient with your workload capacity and making sure those guys get the fundamental training. So just never really deviating from the old school way, and it has worked for decades.
Mike, Ashley Leotis here with WTA Channel 4 here in Pittsburgh. the playoff win drought has been a big topic of conversation here the last few years. When you look back at the last 10 years, what would you do differently? What do you think the biggest change needs to be right now moving forward into this era with you?
Honestly, I don't think you can really look at it that way. Every season's different. Every team you coach is a bit different. Your beliefs and, your standards and the culture you're trying to create, you're trying to move that forward. The most important thing about playoff football is staying in the playoffs. We're not trying to get to the playoffs and doing the things to stay in the playoffs. Playoff footballs are the hardest games to win each and every year. I mean, if earlier we talked about trends. I think that the trends of the fourth quarter changes is something that I know I've been watching, the momentum shifts and so forth, because in a lot of ways when I look at the training of the team, especially the way the off-season programs is orchestrated, you almost have to re-engineer how you want your team to train. And what I'm talking about is you need to put more time and energy into the end of the game, because you look at the playoffs, because it's about winning the championship. It's not about getting to the playoffs and winning one game. It's about bringing the trophy home, and that'll always be the goal. So I think the trends of the playoff football. I think there's been one game this year that didn't come down to the last series, and the whole playoff outcome, and that trend has been in place for years. So there's not too many games in a playoff that does not come down to the 2-minute drill. And then, as I already stated, the fourth quarter momentum swings this year have been at a record pace. So that's what I pay attention to, and because we all have the same amount of time to train the team. The players, have the same amount of time to put it into when we're able to work as a team. But where are you spending that time? So that's really my approach to how I would attack the playoffs.
Mike, Jeremy Scott from WESA here in Pittsburgh. There's the legend of the unopened Iron City can that was passed along from Coach Knoll to Coach Cower, then from Coach Cower to Coach Tomlin. Did you get that can?
Well, I really haven't had a chance to get to the office yet. So, but yeah, I'll let you know. So.
Mike, Mark Cabali, Steelers correspondent for the Pat McAfee Show. You've had great success over the years developing quarterbacks, but you're taking over an organization here who wants to win now. How do you balance winning now and finding that next franchise quarterback?
Well, I think you're always developing the quarterback, and I've been blessed to have great starters. Particularly, the last one, the Dak Prescott, Aaron in Green Bay, Brett, but we've always approached it as the quarterback room, and because that second quarterback, a third quarterback, they need to emulate the starter because that starter is dictating the rhythm and the timing and the precision with the perimeter guys. So I'm excited where I'm going with this. I'm really excited about Will Howard. I think he's someone that I thought he really came on there at Ohio State. I'm anxious to work with him. So it'd be great to have Aaron back. But Will and Mason, I'm really excited to get started with those guys.
Mike, Chris Adamski, Tribune Review, TribLive.com. Do you plan on calling the plays, and what's your timetable for offensive coordinator or any coaching staff? Are those going to be people that you're familiar with from your past or around the league?
Yeah, definitely. I will call the plays on offense, and so obviously we'll run the offense. But these coaching staff, it's a bigger challenge each and every year. And I just think there's more moving parts to it. But it's been very fluid the last 48 hours. So.
Alan Saunders from Pittsburgh Sports Now. I'd like to ask Omar and Art, a lot of the candidates you interviewed were younger coaches, defensive backgrounds. Did you come into this thinking that was maybe something you were going to do, and what was it about Mike that changed your mind maybe or stood out to you compared to some of those younger defensive guys?
We came into this wanting to hire the best coach for the Pittsburgh Steelers, so we did not say, we're trying to hire a young defensive coordinator or, offensive guy. We had an open mind about it, I think, and really just, like I said, want to make sure we found the best coach, and, we were able to interview some great coaches. So I won't say it was an easy decision, but I would say at the end of the day it was an obvious decision for us that Mike was the guy for the job.
Yeah, just to echo what Art said, we were very open, not minded going into this, and interviewed really an awesome group of candidates, and I think Mike's resume speaks for itself. Learned a lot through the process, but we're excited Mike McCarthy's the head coach.
Missy Matthews, Steelers.com. Coach, this is for you and Omar. You guys crossed paths with the Saints many years ago. Short period of time. Is it surreal to be sitting next to each other in the capacity that you are today, and what do you remember about each other back then?
Let me go first.
Yeah, in case you say something stupid.
It's hard to believe it. That was 25 years ago, but I grew up a big Saints fan, so for me that year was really special because that was the first year that the Saints ever won a playoff game. Mike was the offensive coordinator, and it was an unbelievable year, and it was exciting not only as someone that worked in the National Football League, but just as a fan growing up. But we had some good times, but what do I remember the most is just the hard work we put in. I remember the attention to detail that this man to my right used to put into everything he did, and that still resonates with me today. But it was a good year, good experience, and can't believe it's been 25 years.
It's gone fast, and I just, I always remember the first impression of Omar. You get hired, and just things are going 100 mile an hour, and it was my first time being a coordinator, and Omar had worked down in the personnel department and worked with the cap, and Jim Haslett had asked if I want him to work with us on offense, and it was awesome. I think it opened his eyes up to what coaches and players really put into it. And I always admired. You can see right away he's going to be successful. Very bright, hardworking, and and I think we just have always been connected since then.
Hey, Mike, Jeff Hathorn with The Fan and KDK Radio. You mentioned defense wins championships. You've got a lot of defensive guys up here. What is your defensive philosophy, and what are you looking for on that side of the ball from a coaching standpoint?
Well, I mean, as we build the staff, I mean, we definitely want to build off what's in place here. I mean, just as a whole, with this being the third organization that I've walked into the first day, I don't believe in the throw out the baby with the bathwater method. I believe in building off what's in place, and there's a lot here in place. I mean, the defense is system has been here since 1992. Came here with Coach Cower and Don Capers, so always been a fan of it. Always felt it was the toughest one to compete against as an offensive coach. Part of the reason why I went to it in Green Bay. So, those are the things we're focused on right now. We're putting the staff together, but ideally we want to keep the language the same. So, I think those are big decisions when you come in here, because when you got something that works the way it's worked here for so long, I think you should try to do everything you can to build off that, if possible.
Mike, Jenna Harner, WPXI. In an interview you did in Dallas a few years back, you said family first, family and football, and you coach your team that way. What does that look like, and why is that so important to you?
Well, I think just like anything, it's how you're raised. I think it just the basics. Treat people the way you want to be treated. I think respect goes a long ways, and I think it always starts with the locker room, because that locker room is a family, and everything we do, everything that we do that touches the locker room, is to me the primary focus every day. I think that's how you win. You win every day. Those men are making the sacrifices. Those guys are performers, and when they cross the white lines, we got to feel that we've given them everything to be successful. So it's really keeping the light on the locker room, which is the family.
Shelby Cassasi with WPXI. What qualities are most important to you as you form your coaching staff underneath you?
Oh, I mean, a number of them. I think I have a philosophy of how to structure one. I think there's 4 areas that I've looked at. Number one, you got to have experts. You have men that know the league. This league evolves. You definitely want to be on the front end of the cycle. You want to be on the back end. So that's important to have the expertise and experience at a certain level. I think it's important to look at the current coaching staff in place. A lot of good coaches that were here in place under Mike, and you have to take that into consideration, because that's part of the fit and the ability to move forward and make them part of it. If you feel like it fits. And the third one is, you got to look at some of the young and new ideas out there that would fit the direction that you want to go with your team. So, and then you got to have them young dudes. You got to have the guys that grind. You got to have the grinders that are going to be there. And frankly, they came up the way Omar and I did. We didn't have the resources back then that you have today in computers. So, you slept in the office back then. You did those things. I'm not looking for that now because of the resources you do have. But so staying true to that, that methodology is how I've done it. And at the end of the day, it has to fit together.
Mike DeFabo with The Athletic. Mike, you bring a reputation of offensive football. I'm curious, just how would you describe your philosophy on offense, and how has that evolved over time?
Well, I'm a believer in the tradition of the West Coast offense, and the first thing that always came to mind was the offense needs to be built to make the quarterback successful, for as simplistic as it is. And that starts with running the football. I mean, you got to run the football, because if you don't run the football and you don't, tailor your protection schemes in the action pass game to the run game, obviously it's not going to affect the defense and have the benefits of what you're looking for. So, and then, in the way the quarterback's coached in that system, you want a more athletic player in that position, the man that can extend plays and play to the rhythm, timing, spacing, and all the things that go into to an offensive system. So, but at the end of the day, you'll never hear me say this, because I would never say we run the West Coast offense. If your system of football cannot take in every player that Omar and Art want to bring to the Pittsburgh Steelers, then you need to take a look at your system. So we need to make sure we can accommodate the variety of players that are available to us.
A few more. This one's for Omar, and then a follow-up for Mike. Omar, Mike's had an extensive time working with the quarterbacks. How much did that play a factor in bringing him on to be the head coach? Because I know, you've been making it a priority to find a long-term option at quarterback. And then, Mike, how has the quarterback position evolved, and what have you learned over the time of working all the way back with Joe Montana, but then also recently with Dak Prescott?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'd say, look, with everybody we talk to, the conversation of developing the next next quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers was part of it. I think Mike's resume speaks for itself, who he's been around. But we're excited about working with Will, and that was a part of it.
Quarterback play, I think the obvious is the role changes, their ability to run. They're running. The quarterback runs, the called quarterback runs is probably the biggest thing that's changed in the last 5, 6, 7 years. And obviously, the rules, protecting them and making it possible. I mean, just the way you play defense, you got a 7-gap run scheme now. It has an 8th element to it because the quarterback can pull the ball, no different than the 8-gap, 9-gap scheme. So, I mean, I think that is the biggest evolution that I think is obvious to all of us. But at the end of the day, to win these big games that are being played, in January, they still got to make throws from the pocket, and that's why the belief and the footwork and the training and all those things, that goes into it. But yeah, the running quarterback is the biggest change that I've seen.
Hey, Mike, Brian Batko from the Post-Gazette. I just wanted to ask you, I mean, what can you share about what these last 72 hours have been like for you? How much of it's been, whether it's returning calls and texts to family and friends, or planning the next steps, draft process, pre-draft wise? What can you pull back the curtain for us on these few days?
I think the two words that jump to the front are overwhelming and surreal. The opportunity of the Pittsburgh Steelers, but the overwhelming response that's occurred. I mean, I've seen more. I've received probably twice as many, at least, text messages and calls than I did when we won the Super Bowl. It's been overwhelming. So, but the last 48, 72 hours have been about the staff. So I mean, it's just been nonstop because trying to make it fit together, and there's it's more difficult to put a staff together today than it was 6 years ago, and definitely 20 years ago. So
2 more, and then we'll have some photo opportunities. Mike, Ray Fittipaldo from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. When do you need to have an answer from Aaron by? And then second part of the question is, you took this year off. What's your first thoughts on this year's quarterback class coming out of college?
That's probably a better question for Omar, just because I'm just getting started on on the draft process, and we'll dive into that, frankly, once we get past this coaching staff development. But yeah, timelines, we haven't discussed that yet.
Nick Faribaugh, Penn Live. Mike, your system has had lots of star receivers, guys like Jordy Nelson, C.E. Lamb. As you look at the current state of your wide receivers and your weaponry, adding in the tight end and running back room, what stands out about it to you, and do you maybe need to add new types of receivers to fit what you want to do schematically?
Well, I just think like any coach, you're supposed to look at what you have and you look at the opportunity to develop. And, as far as the receiver position as a whole, we were at our best in Green Bay. The Jordy Nelson era is because all those guys work so well together. And, this game's about matchups. Your ability to put, your third receiver on the third corner or the third, and hopefully that's a favorable matchup, or move those guys around. And, you want your receivers to be able to play all three positions, because when you can have the flexibility of that, that goes back to the first statement about making a quarterback successful, because the quarterbacks are trained in conceptual, in conceptual development of how you throw the football, so that helps you with their footwork training. Because but if you got 900 plays just to beat every defense or beat every, that's very difficult on a quarterback. So if you truly want to play to the rhythm and time of the quarterback, your perimeter guys being able to play multiple positions is very important. So that'll be our approach with these guys, and I'm looking forward to getting started with them.
All right, thank you, guys. Give us a minute here. We're going to remove the table and do some photo opportunities.
Welcome to the Drive, Steelers Nation, where you have just heard the introductory press conference for Mike McCarthy. It is now officially official, the 17th head coach in franchise history. Of course, we all know just the fourth head coach hired by the Steelers since all the way back in 1969. Matt, signed, sealed, delivered, and emotional Mike McCarthy here, or this afternoon, I should say, down at Acrisure Stadium.
That's the first thing that stood out to me, was the emotion behind it all. And, it obviously means a lot to him, and the hometown, aspect of it all adds to it, of course. Now, that doesn't make you a better football coach.
No,
just 'cause
absolutely.
you grew up or were born down the road, or, any of those things. But I do think it's very important to him. He didn't get a lot into scheme or the roster in particular. Will Howard's name popped up. Rogers' name popped up. I heard a reference to the 3-4 defense.
Yes.
I don't know if that's going to influence what coordinator they hire on that side of the ball. But good stuff all in all. Right.
He mentioned a lot of different specifics here that we can kind of jump into as we roll along. But I think the biggest one there that you mentioned is being asked about Aaron Rodgers. And when he was asked, would you be interested in having Aaron Rodgers back? He said, and I quote, "Definitely. I don't see why you wouldn't," end quote, on Aaron Rodgers. Now, later on, they talked about timelines, and he's got to talk with Omar Khan and the draft and free agency and all these different things. But there was no dancing around the answer from him. There was no, politically correct answer. I know that's not the exact term, but you know what I mean. He could have easily given, I think, a non-answer to I haven't even really thought about that, and I'm just getting into roster evaluations, and I've just started to have conversations with Omar. He was like, no, definitely, I don't see why you wouldn't. That to me is pretty telling, and I think, obviously Aaron, and he's got his whole say, and does he want to play another year? Does he want that to be here in Pittsburgh? But I think that door is pretty wide open as we stand here, today on Tuesday, January 27th.
Yeah, that's just the vibe I got as well, and I'm sure that was discussed before he was hired. It's not the first time Aaron Rodgers' name's popped up in that building in the last 24 hours or so. And I understand it. Have mixed feelings because I have great respect for Rodgers' career. He exceeded my expectations here too, but I also think there better be a long-term plan in place as well. And I'm sure there will be, don't get me wrong. But the way he answered it, I was fond of. Would you be interested? Yes, we'd be interested, and without hesitation.
And I guess it's all in how the question is worded, right?
Right.
Because of course we'd be interested.
Yeah, interested, right.
Yeah, totally, definitely. Why wouldn't I be interested?
Doesn't mean we're inking on a contract tomorrow.
Sure.
Who knows?
Sure. That's a good point by you. And Yeah, he talked about how, it's an honor to follow guys like Bill Cowher and Mike Tomlin. And
I appreciated that he mentioned that right off the bat. Yeah.
I did too. And how about NPR there asking the Iron City question? The beer can. I forgot about that famous story of Bill Cowher leaving the Iron City beer for Mike Tomlin in the fridge there in the office. Mike McCarthy was asked if that same can of beer was still there. He said, "I haven't really been to the office much yet, so I
probably hasn't put anything in the fridge yet.
Have to let you know."
But some intern or something should grab a case of iron and sneak one in there. In
so
the
if there's
meantime.
not one in there, you better figure it out. Better figure it out real quick. The opening statement from Steelers president Art Rooney II on Mike McCarthy was as follows. I am pleased to announce the hiring of Mike McCarthy as our next head coach. Mike brings a proven track record of success, championship excellence, and a deep understanding of what it takes to build and sustain a winning culture in the National Football League. Throughout his career, Mike has demonstrated strong leadership, a commitment to player development, and the ability to adapt and evolve in a highly competitive league. His experience, preparation, and respect for the traditions of this organization align with the values that we have defined the Pittsburgh Steelers for generations. Pardon me, let me say that again. Align with the values that have defined the Pittsburgh Steelers for generations. We are confident that Mike is the right leader for our football team, and we look forward to working together as we pursue our goal of competing for championships and representing Steelers Nation with pride. End quote there from Art Rooney II, who was on site, along with, obviously, Omar Khan and some other, Mel Blount was hanging out down there.
Yeah, there's players and former players.
Joey Porter Sr. and some current guys, I think Peasy Jr. and Alex Highsmith were down there as well. I think I saw Ryan Shazier in one of the shots down there. So a lot of moving and shaking, certainly, and it is now in the books, Matt. Now the work begins. Now the work begins, and really now the fun really starts. And kind of from our perspective of filling out the coaching staff here in the coming weeks, something that we'll talk about more in hour number 2, and Senior Bowl, Combine, free agency. I mean, free agency, Matt, is just a shade over a month away.
I say things are going to happen pretty soon here.
5 weeks away from free agency.
Yeah, I mean, so timeline for the Steelers, I would imagine, is we'll start to hear things about hirings. I would think that's coming rather soon. I know we'll go around the league at some point in the next hour and a half or whatever, but Adam Schefter thinks the other head coaching jobs are pretty set to fall in line.
Okay.
So coordinators can then follow in turn, and it sounds like the Steelers reached out to a coordinator already. Senior Bowl is going to be hot and heavy.
It sure is.
It really is draft season now, too. And like you said, free agency is really close.
It sure is. I mean, 5 weeks away, and we could see those. Yeah. So even before that, like about 4 weeks from now, we could see all those reports trickling out of, verbal agreements and during the legal tampering period between the Steelers and free agents.
Or maybe they re-sign somebody of their own. They don't let them test the waters,
Yep, absolutely. So a whole lot to keep an eye on here. I want to get into more of what Mike McCarthy said, talking about that 3-4 defense, talking about calling the plays, talking about what he believes in as his offensive philosophy. We'll get into all those things and more here. We'll talk to Chris Adamski. He was down there on the south side. He'll join us about 40 minutes from now in hour number 2 as well. So plenty to get to as we roll along, just getting started here. It is the Drive on a Tuesday. Wes Uhler and Matt Williamson with you on Steelers Nation Radio on the Steelers Audio Network. All right, Matt, we are back here on the Drive, rolling along, reacting to Mike McCarthy's press conference as he was just named 17th head coach in Pittsburgh Steelers franchise history. I got some offensive stuff and some defensive stuff that I want us to sink our teeth into. Let's start with one that you mentioned already. He wants to stay with the 3-4 defense. He mentioned that, talked about how it
sounded that way.
Tradition.
Yeah, right.
And he made a comment along the lines of like, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and this is the the personnel that we have here. And so again, we always have to be careful that at these press conferences, what everyone says, it's not ironclad,
right?
It's not written in stone, but it does sound like there won't be a massive overhaul of the defensive scheme.
If we operate under that assumption, which who knows, and he may have a D coordinator lined up that has a 3-4 background, so he knows that's the way it's going to be anyway.
Sure,
I don't know. First off, I don't say this enough because I assume all the listeners know, and I shouldn't. the lines between 4-3 and 3-4 are much blurrier now than they were back in the day, and the Cower days, the Casey Hampton, Joel Steed days, where we were two-gapping, and we always had a big nose, and the two defensive ends were 6'5", and then you had two speedballs off the edge. There's a lot of varieties right now across the league of five-man fronts, and that's really the way to look at it. It's bothered me since I could crawl or knew anything about football that 3-4 teams call those edge guys linebackers of any sort because they don't
used
back
to be
the
outside
line.
linebackers.
Right.
Now it's edge guys, right?
They are edge guys. You know, I mean, they're more upfield pass rushers. I mean, it's not like they drop into coverage like the LeBeau days a lot. I mean, it happens here and there, but everybody's moving guys around. And most of the league's playing in nickel. So, okay, if your base is a 3-4, that's fine. But I think this personnel isn't pigeonholed to that either. I mean, there's not a Hampton on this team that can only do that.
Sure.
You know?
Sure. And you have some guys that have some versatility that you think you could ask them to maybe be a little more multiple as well. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and obviously that'll be something we'll discuss more whenever the defensive coordinator hire is made and known, and we can dissect that a little bit more.
But it certainly wouldn't shock me if they did hire somebody with that at least has a 3-4 background.
Sure.
But I think it's crazy to be like, well, the defense was great in 1985 because with a 3-4, then we should run a 3-4. You know, like just you don't keep the same scheme because of tradition. The league's changing. You know what I mean? That's like, well, the Celtics in the 60s didn't shoot 3-pointers, so we're not going to shoot 3-pointers. Right. Yeah, they won a ton of games. Well, that's okay. You're going to lose a lot of games. You're going to do that.
Great.
Right,
yeah, you're right. You got to get with it or get lost.
Right.
So that I found. I found
that was interesting. He said the words 3-4.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Another thing that he did not make any bones about. He answered directly. Was actually asked by Chris Adamski, who we'll talk to here in hour number 2. He said, and I quote, "I will call the plays." In terms of the offense, I think we knew that, but he's
been on record other places saying, "I'll never give that up."
Correct.
But he has not said that as an employee of the Steelers.
And I like hearing that because I like that there's not the. I feel like, and I understand it, Matt. I'm not naive. I understand why teams do that. Of like if you make it so clear cut, delegated. Here's who does this. Here's who does that. Here's who does that. It can almost open you up more so for criticism.
Yeah,
like I get it. As you say all the time, these are all businesses that operate differently.
Of course,
it's McDonald's and Chick-fil-A and Wendy's, and they do things differently, but they're in their same orbit.
They all feed you and compete against each other, but
they're trying to protect their people and protect their image. And in a way, let's not kid ourselves, like control narratives and all those different things.
Of course.
And so a lot of times, coaches, organizations will be coy around that. Who calls the plays on offense, on defense? Who exactly is in charge? Well, it's a collective effort and all these different things.
Right.
I liked Mike McCarthy making no bones about that, coming right out and saying, I'll call the plays on offense.
Like we knew Mike Tomlin was heavily involved with the defense. I mean, he was involved with the whole team, but especially the defense. But we never knew to what degree and who's calling what. And on this make it or break it third down, who overrides
or in the red zone, who gets the final call.
But when the head coach is calling every play on offense, he's going to be judge and jury, of course, across the board. There might be somebody in his ear here and there. Now, not to rain a negative light on it because he's done it his whole career. Well, there was a stretch, like the 2-year stretch there that he gave it up, I think, because he said he's never going to give it up again. But Andy Reid was a victim of this. A lot of these head coaches that call plays struggle with clock management and head coach stuff and
CEO stuff.
Yeah, I mean on game day, because I got I got the thing in front of me. I'm thinking about the next play. Should I call a timeout? Should I not? And frankly, that's been one of the criticisms of McCarthy over his head coaching career is game management stuff.
Sure.
Now, from what I understand, and I read this, I can't confirm it, but in Dallas, I think after his first year, or there was a stint there that the Cowboys hired somebody just for that reason. They kind of had like a game day clock management, game manager guy. Okay. And I'm sure they did a lot of other things during the course of the week, of course. He didn't just show up for 3 hours every Sunday. I mean, he was on the coaching staff, and they had a bigger coaching staff than the Steelers. I'm curious how that'll be handled. Will be somebody in the booth, if he's calling plays, hey, slow it down, coach, or speed it up, or might want to call a timeout here, or are you going, if you don't get it, are you going for it on fourth, or go for two, or all that kind of stuff, obviously. So that's every decision has a positive and a negative. I love that he's calling plays because he has a very good track record of doing it. I'll bet on him to do a better job than, frankly, anyone around here in recent memory, because I think he's been the best track record of the play callers that have been here over the last 6 years.
Sure.
But there's a negative to it, too. There's a reason some of the smart offensive minds give it up.
And that makes a ton of sense because, like you kind of mentioned, you're in your call sheet.
Right.
You're thinking about the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, the next play call. You know, if your defense is out on the field but you're about to get the ball back, you're thinking, all right, where's our starting field position? What do we want to do on first down?
Right.
Like,
some of those guys get busy talking to the quarterback.
Get busy talking to the quarterback or the offensive line or the wide receivers or your offensive coordinator or your offensive line coach.
It's a big job, and you can't just hit pause like you're playing Madden and there's 70,000 people screaming at you and there's a play clock and things happen quick on the sidelines.
Yes, and also you're standing down on the sideline.
Yeah.
You don't have a monitor right in front of your face with the time and the play clock.
No,
And you know
find all that stuff.
The play clock is down in the end zone somewhere, and the game clock is up on the jumbotron somewhere. And I think
got a lot of responsibility.
I think people can understand why that's a lot to juggle. And you're right, that is one of the common criticisms of coaches who call their own plays is you don't have enough brain power to be fully invested in that and fully invested in the CEO bigger picture, timeouts and clock management and
pulled a lot of ways. Your left guard's hurt, but you didn't realize there was a substitution. I mean, all those things.
Sure.
Right.
But I take it from your standpoint, if the play calling track record is as successful as it has been for Mike McCarthy, that's a fair risk to take.
Yes, I think one of the reasons you hire him is because he's such a good play caller and game day offensive mind. We may never find these answers out. Like that's one of the things that a lot of people don't divulge to the media. Who's in your ear about replays? Who's in your ear about timeouts and stuff like that? We may never find those things out. But I hope that they're addressing the idea like they did in Dallas, apparently, that there is someone on game day that pretty much that's their only responsibility is game management stuff or game management advice.
I know
that
that
doesn't mean they're in charge.
I know that's become much more popular around the league.
Yeah.
With coaches challenges,
You don't even have to have a football background. I mean, hire someone from MIT or right.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
In fact, I think there was a guy who was doing that stuff. I can't remember if it was for the Pirates or the Penguins that was from CMU.
That makes sense.
And he was like a video analytics guy, and he was the one who was like, "Oh, that ball actually landed foul," or that was outside the strike zone, or that hockey puck didn't completely cross the goal line, whatever. And they like radio down to the coach. And
in this instant, coach, the analytics tell you to go for two.
That exactly right.
Okay, that sounds great, but I don't like any of our 2-point plays. I'm not going to anyways. But at least I thought about it.
Or this fourth and three from midfield. Right. It tells you to
yeah.
Sure.
The analytics say go for it. He said, okay, great, but my entire interior line's hurt and we can't block anybody. So
and
I'm
the
not
snow's coming down and the wind's blowing and field position's going to be at a premium. Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. To start hour number 2, one of the things that Mike McCarthy said, and I saved this for last because I wanted to have more time for it, is that he's a believer in the tradition of the West Coast offense.
Yes.
What does that mean? What does that look like? What does that mean for quarterbacks? We will discuss all of that when we return to start hour number 2. Wes Uhler, Matt Williamson, halfway home here on The Drive today on Steelers Nation Radio on the Steelers Audio Network. So when asked about his offensive philosophy, Mike McCarthy says that he is, and I quote, a believer in the tradition of the West Coast offense, end quote. And then immediately mentioned a bunch of stuff about the quarterback and making the quarterback comfortable that I want to get into with our resident football guru, Matt Williamson. Matt, when you hear a football coach at any level, but an NFL football coach, head coach, say, I'm a believer in the tradition of the West Coast offense, what's that mean? Paint that picture for our audience.
So, history lesson, the West Coast offense basically started out as the Ohio River offense in Cincinnati.
Funny enough, the West Coast offense
Right.
started in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Months ago, we had Ken Anderson for the Hall of Fame
We talked about this a little bit.
'cause he's up against LC for the Veterans Committee. And Walsh was the offensive coordinator for the Bengals. And I forget who the Bengals head coach was, but Walsh fully expected to get the bump and become the head guy in Cincinnati. And as the Bengals often do, they screwed it up and gave it to somebody else. And the Niners, Eddie DeBartolo from Youngstown says,
Eddie DeBartolo.
This Walsh character seems like he knows a thing or two. Come to San Francisco, who was a terrible team at the time. We're talking late 70s here, early, that era. And install your offense. He was considered like the Ben Johnson of the time, if there was an internet and people knew about those things. Innovative, super innovative young mind. And West Coast offense.
Real quick for you, just Eddie DeBartolo and the Youngstown connection. That's a big reason why every 8 years when the Steelers host the Niners, you see them bussing a bunch of people in red and gold from Youngstown. There's a ton of, I lived there for 2 years working for the hockey team.
Yes.
It's like random buildings have the Niners logo like on the side. Like
Do
my
they
first
really?
week in Youngstown, I was like, what's with all the Niners logos? And they were like, what do you know about the DeBartolo family? I was like, you mean the family that owned the Penguins for a couple years? And they were like, oh, hold on, let us tell you.
And he's considered one of the best owners
He's
ever.
considered,
Eddie,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And then also, just real quick, could you imagine an alternate world where the Bengals did hire Billy Walsh, and now they have like 4 or 5 Super Bowls?
Right. Yeah, Coach Walsh did pretty well.
Dodged a bullet there.
Right. So, again, it was super innovative at the time. And they threw to the backs a lot. I remember when I was a kid, a lot of the purists, even when the Niners were winning a ton of games before they won Super Bowls, this is too finesse to win in the league. You're not tough enough. You're not the Steel Curtain, the Purple People Eaters, handing it to Jim Brown. You guys are too soft. You throw the ball all the time. Well, no, not even a little. It was so innovative in that, and many of these principles still exist, where Walsh married up to the 10th of a second where this player should be in his route exactly with the drop. On a 3-step drop, it's not 1.9 seconds, it's 2.0, and the ball comes out now to this read. If it's not there, you go to the next one. Your footwork is unbelievably important.
Timing, rhythm, precision.
Yeah. You can find a lot of Walsh stuff online. 6 inches in front of the numbers, not 8 inches in front of the numbers, not below the numbers, not the face mask. And
because that leads to yards after catch, which is another huge principle of the West Coast offense.
Right. He threw to Roger Craig a lot when running backs weren't catching passes.
We talked about that with the LC Greenwood stuff too.
Yeah. 5 eligible is a thing too. Protection's not as important because the ball's coming out now. So there's a lot to it, but that's early 80s. And it took a long time for that. And actually, it's one of the reasons, history lesson, LeBeau's zone blitzes had that in mind because they were dropping people Walsh and company didn't expect to drop into like those slant throwing lanes and things of that nature. And they're bringing pressure from other spots because the West Coast offense is just carving the league up. Unbelievably timing oriented, etc. So Shanahan and McVay, if you go down the tree, Daddy Shanahan with the Broncos was a direct Walsh disciple.
And brought in that zone, married it with the zone run scheme,
Exactly,
right?
And a big reason, not to give you a Denver history lesson, but Shanahan was smart enough to realize we play in extreme altitude. We want to play fast with lighter offensive linemen.
Wear down our opposition.
We don't need 350-pound guys. We want to keep them moving laterally all day long.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And by the end of the day, they're huffing and puffing because they can't breathe. And we're going to hit quick hitters off of that and slants and 3-step drop, 5-step drop, all those things. So the next generation, of course, is like Kyle Shanahan and McVay that learned from Daddy Shanahan. And Kubiak was his right-hand man, was Elway's backup in those days and all those things. However, and this is not a knock on Coach McCarthy, what the Niners and Rams are running now has its roots in West Coast offense, but a lot of West Coast offense core principles aren't outdated, but you can't run the
They've just
same
evolved.
offense
Sure,
that Bill
you can.
Walsh ran.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Right.
Absolutely.
Like the Legion of Boom cover of 3 swept the league whenever they were winning games. That wasn't that long ago. Now everyone knows cover 3 beaters. I mean, if you're going to run cover 3 over and over and over, unless you have Pro Bowlers everywhere like Seattle did, and at that time it was kind of new. I mean, or at least it was different. The world has evolved.
Yeah.
Like, oh, if you're going to keep giving me cover
That's
3,
how
I'm
any
gonna
scheme is in football,
every
right?
scheme is. It's
Eventually,
all-
they'll find a way to counter it.
Right.
And that's why the game is so cyclical. We go from airing it out to running the football to airing it out to running the football to
Yes.
lighter boxes, heavier boxes, lighter boxes, heavier boxes.
Exactly, right. Fullbacks came back and things like that. So one of the criticisms I've heard about McCarthy is, will he continue to evolve? A lot of his scheme, even in Dallas, was player-oriented. And by that, I mean he's really, really good at maximizing his quarterback. He's really, really good at taking very good players and getting great production from them. And he gets the ball in his hands of the best players. CeeDee Lamb, I'm talking about recent memory. But can he scheme up Jonnu Smith and Calvin Austin and guys that, you know what I mean, that type of thing.
That are not CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah.
With all due respect. But I think that's.
And Rodgers has some of these criticisms too, is he's an old dog that doesn't want to learn the newest tricks. Is McCarthy willing to blend in futuristic thinking, whatever the next thing is, to the existing roots of the West Coast offense? At least that's the way I interpret it, right.
It's a great question.
Yeah,
and it's a whole lot to chew on, honestly.
And we'll have to see it. I mean, we'll start talking about that stuff in camp and, watching plays live and things like that.
According to Encyclopedia Britannica,
Mm-hmm.
for all you kids out there, that was like Chat GPT for us before Chat GPT.
Yeah, and it was heavy.
It was heavy.
Yeah.
You had to go to the school library or hope grandma had the full collection somewhere in her den.
I'd say if you had some or knew somebody, it made your book reports a lot easier.
Absolutely.
I mean, nobody knew that you could just write it down from, just steal it right from an encyclopedia.
I still remember my dad had like a little studio/office in the house that we grew up in, and like the encyclopedia is up on like the top shelf, above his music, and I'd have to get a stool and what am I researching today? Oh, I don't know, the Mississippi River. All right, let's go to M and pull that out.
Lewis and Clark.
Lewis and Clark.
Yeah.
According to Encyclopedia Britannica,
and I think someone came door to door selling
oh,
encyclopedias.
they sure did.
They
sure did.
Yeah.
The West Coast offense is a precise, timing-based system that emphasizes short horizontal passes to move the ball, acting as an extension of the run game, relies on timing and rhythm, yards after catch, and balancing the field. Matt,
short way of putting it. Yeah. And
Matt,
it was extremely innovative, but that was 1981.
No doubt. And that's how, that's how everything, right? That's how the air raid and the spread offense and how that's evolved and adapted.
Yeah.
Like nothing stays what it is. It all has to change and adapt.
And there's a couple systems, like Air Coryell had a totally different system at that time. But a lot of it now is verbiage. Like if you grew up in the West Coast offense, you called this pattern this. If you're this route combination.
Spider Y banana.
Right, exactly. Gruden was a West Coast
Gruden
guy.
was
Yeah.
Spider Y banana.
Yeah. So a lot of it's just what language you're speaking.
I will say West Coast offense rolls off the tongue much nicer than Ohio River offense.
Right.
That worked out well for all of us. When he mentions quarterback comfortability as a big part of that, is that because of the timing and the rhythm that helps a quarterback stay comfortable in what they're being asked to do? Is it because of how quickly you're getting rid of the football? Is it because what you're asking your offensive line? How does when a West Coast offense is humming?
Yeah.
How does that make a quarterback comfortable and allow them to get into rhythm?
Well, it is definitely. I definitely believe in momentum, rhythm, those type of things. Getting easy completions early to get get a couple layups in.
See the ball go in the hoop a couple times, right?
I think he's definitely good at that. I didn't exactly know what he meant by that, but I do think he has very good communication with Favre, Rodgers, Montana, Dak, whoever, to see what they're most comfortable with. Not like you're going to do it my way, I'm going to do what you like. And he's maximized those players as well. But from what I understand, and I guess there are some of McCarthy's coaching clinics from 10 years ago on YouTube.
I'm sure.
And you can find a lot of these guys' coaching clinics, and you can find parts of playbooks online and things like that. He is really considered, over the top's a strong word because people will be like, that's negative, but an extremist in terms of the extreme details of quarterback play. Not only like the stuff I explained with Walsh, and this is what I've understood. Not only is your 5-step drop need to be at this exact point, don't drift from your landing spot. Has to come at X amount of seconds, but he'll even do things in his like you're putting too much weight on your outside foot or on the outside of your foot on this drop, or you're carrying the ball
hyper intense mechanics.
Yeah, exactly.
Some of the Josh Allen stuff you and I have talked about.
Yeah,
in
exactly,
the past.
exactly. But he's known for that, in terms of detail oriented, extreme detail oriented, and repeatable mechanics, and things like that. And that's a Brady thing too, like.
And it's as you've laid out many times too. It's an Aaron Rodgers thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like everything has to be detailed. Everything has to be exactly as it's supposed to be. There's no freelance. There's no coloring outside the lines.
Now, when the play breaks down, you adapt and all those things.
Sure.
But like even Rodgers was, again, I wasn't at Packer practices, but I think it was during the McCarthy era. He would run practices where this practice, I will never throw a ball with anything touching the ground. Both feet are going to be off the ground. I mean, no one's rushing him. I mean, he's in practice, but I know that this is going to come up. So today's practice, I'm going to stress this. And these are legends, but I assume that there's some truth behind them. And he seems that way when you kind of hang out with or near Rodgers.
Can see it, definitely.
So even like when the play breaks down, it's still repeatable mechanics and things of that nature. And Brady was really good at that stuff too.
You've got to have it all mastered to be able to improvise in those moments where it breaks down. Almost, it's like.
And McCarthy even mentioned it in the press conference when someone asked him about his Saints days with Omar, and we would sleep in the office, and we just had to work and grind through it, and apparently that's a strength of his, especially with the offensive stuff, the quarterback stuff, the passing game stuff,
I tell you what, he sure didn't do much to throw any cold water on that Will Hard hype around Western Pennsylvania and Steeler Nation.
Up, right?
He did.
Right.
Said he was anxious to work with him.
Yeah. Before he mentioned any other player or whatever.
Referenced his time at Ohio State, and we get it. I'm sure that was very early on in the conversation of his interview was what's your quarterback plan / what do you think about Will Howard, and even maybe Mason Rudolph factoring into that conversation. I'm sure Aaron Rodgers, obviously, and specifically for him with the history that they have together. But
maybe they think they have something there. I don't know. I mean, I'm more open to that idea than I've ever been, but it would not be my only plan. But it's interesting that the name pops up more and more and more with the coaching circles.
It sure does. And again, like I said, no attempt made at all to throw any cold water on that one.
No.
So certainly
in the plans. We know that. It's not a throwaway. I'm not picking on the guy, but like when they drafted Ololakon, his name never came up.
We just need a camp arm.
Right. That guy's name never came up,
Someone whose name comes up on this show about once a week is Chris Adamski. Of course, covers the Steelers for the Trib, co-hosts the Steelers Blitz with Tom Opperman. We will talk to Buzz. He was at Acrisure Stadium, probably still there now, working on his articles and his reports and all those things. We'll get his thoughts on the introduction of Mike McCarthy, some of those specific comments that McCarthy made to the assembled media just about an hour ago. We'll get into all that and more with Chris Adamski when we return on the other side. You are listening to The Drive on Steelers Nation Radio on the Steelers Audio Network. Back on The Drive here as we continue to react to Mike McCarthy's introductory press conference and, of course, him being named the 17th head coach in the storied history of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Joining us now to discuss is our friend Chris Adamski, of course, covers the Steelers for the Trib, co-hosts the Steelers Blitz with our guy Tom Opperman. Buzz, thank you for taking the time as always. What was it like down there? Seemed like an emotional Mike McCarthy. His family there, mentioned his address growing up a few times, said the line, "Pittsburgh is my world" in his opening statement. And I'm sure you kind of felt all that emotion being down there in attendance at Acrisure Stadium.
Yeah, Wes, the way I like to look at it is, I think generally most, not all, but most people are very proud where they're from. Heck, me and you talk about Mars all the time, for crying out loud.
It's kind of old.
And hey, Mr. Mount Lebanon, I want to hear you next time we have one of those. But I do think, I genuinely believe that people from Pittsburgh, the Pittsburgh area, which counts Mars and Mount Lebanon, that are very proud, more so proud than on average if you go to most of the people from other cities. So I think that those are truisms. And I think you saw that reflected. I don't think there's no, there are coaches that might be from this town or whatever, or individuals, and maybe they come back home, and that, there's definitely always been a pride. We've known that over the past year. I mean, Aaron Rodgers, both, in press conference situations or just chatting with him, kind of off the record in the locker room, he would talk about it. He'd always bring it up. Mike told me about this place, or Mike told me about this pizza. He'd always be bringing up things like that. That just showed me that over 13 years, a decade ago, Mike McCarthy was always bringing up Pittsburgh and kind of, longing for the place, in some ways, or he would mean a lot to him. So I don't think it is, just a line that you hear, I come home or whatever. I mean, you could see the emotion, you could see the tears, you see all his families here, and just, in the time here over these past 4 days or so, just being able to talk to so many people from Greenfield or from old Bishop Boyle High School in Homestead or whatever, he definitely has a fan base for sure, and Mike is, it's genuine. It isn't, and again, you can't fake those. You can win the press conference, you can say the right things, and he's definitely good at that. He's been a head coach for a long time. He knows what to say, but that emotion, that's definitely real, and it's not something that's just put on.
So, Chris, we're obviously in studio and weren't in attendance, but we got the glimpses of quite a few former Steeler players, as well as maybe some active guys as well. Was there a lot of those in attendance? Mel Blount and a couple other guys like that?
Yeah, I think there was about 8 or 9. There was, let's see, Mel Blount, Will Allen, Joey Porter Sr., Joey Porter Jr.,
Okay.
Alex Highsmith, Ryan Shazier. What am I up to there, 6 or 7?
Yeah.
That might be it. There might have been 1 or 2 others, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, they were. I mean, it was cool to see. I didn't see Joey Jr. until after. I kind of what my angle was. But Alex walked in. Kind of. He had probably the closest seat to Mike, and you heard Mike maybe reference him at one point. He said it's good to see Alex here. So he was sitting right in front of him. So yeah, that was cool. I assume. To some degree, anybody's kind of, I don't know what qualification you need to have to be an alumni, to be invited or be welcomed here. I mean, all those guys, I believe, all live in the area, full time. I don't know about Alex for sure, but you get, when the Mel's from around here and all that. So I'm sure that the Steelers definitely. I mean, and then a good old Irish Catholic family. The McCarthys took up like 3 rows of.
Oh, did I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, and up front there between his, his kids and his brother and his parents and then cousins, things like that. So it was, again, getting back to that sort of hometowny Pittsburgh feel that you get from the whole situation.
Tuesday Mass, Dan Acrisure for the McCarthy gang. Buzz, one of the things you were the one who asked about calling the plays, and Mike McCarthy, he didn't shy away from it. He said, yes, I will call the plays. I got to imagine that's a refreshing answer. It's something we know. That's his track record. He's talked about it. He mentioned, he gave it, he didn't mention it in this press conference, but he's mentioned in the past. Matt pointed out that he gave up play calling for 2 years of his career and said he'd never do it again thing. Leaning into that, I will call the plays was his answer to your question. I got to imagine that's refreshing to hear, and that's going to be one of those things right out of the chute that I think we're all keeping an eye on when, the regular season gets going in September.
Yeah, we were talking about it, and without, going back to, 1933 or whatever, but I imagine then it was a lot like up until the 70s, Terry Bradshaw's calling his plays. There's probably never been a head coach in Steelers history that called the plays. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but it just seems maybe, it's relatively rare even to this day, although I guess in some point, what is there, probably 6 or so coaches in the league right now, I would guess.
I would guess Andy Reid and McVay and,
O'Connell probably does, right?
Mm-hmm.
But so it's not completely totally rare or shocking, but it's still not the common practice. And of course, coordinators and up until 50 years ago, quarterbacks would a lot of times call their own plays. So it's something different for sure. And hey, this is like I said, as much as I mentioned McVay there. McVay is kind of the hot young offensive mind. He has been now for several years here in the league. But I mean, that was Mike McCarthy 20 years ago, right? I mean, that was it was the that tree coming from where he came from, and he was a coveted head coach and there 19 years ago for Green Bay, and coming from being kind of one of those young, at that point, a young bright offensive mind coming up. So it's it is one of those things I think amongst the fan base is like what's some of the cliches? The most popular man in town is the backup quarterback. I think the least popular man in town is always the play caller. You know what I'm saying? Like I feel like offensive coordinator is an easy target a lot of times when things aren't going well, or if it ain't going well, certainly there's been elements of that in recent years here with the Steelers, with at least one coordinator in particular, play caller. But I think that's something. And hey, how long has it been since the Steelers had a head coach with an offensive background, let alone one that calls the plays? Right, we're going back at least 60 years. So without knowing, those guys that coached them at that era, if they were even off from the offensive side or defensive side of their ball or not, it's been a long time.
So, of course, the quarterback situation came up, and he quickly said something along the lines of, yes, why wouldn't you be interested in bringing back Aaron Rodgers?
Definitely don't see why you wouldn't.
Okay. So certainly didn't dismiss that. I'm sure those conversations were had before he ever put pen to paper. And unsolicited, he brought up Will Howard's name. I mean, I know he was talking quarterbacks, but nobody asked him specifically about Howard from what I remember. He brought that up. Do you get the impression that those two are very much in the mix for next year?
Yeah, you're right, because he brought up Howard unsolicited, and also talking to Bob Labriola the other day, Art Rooney essentially brought it up, I guess, unsolicited or whatever. It brought up, it got brought up with the team president referencing the quarterback or referencing the new head coach, talking about Will Howard, which I didn't think they had to do at that point for sure. So part of me says, well, if you're asked in this setting about a player who's currently on the roster, you're not going to say, well, I don't know about that Will Howard. Sure. What are you going to say, right? I mean, you have to kind of be positive. So part of me wants to say that, but you're right. It seems like he's certainly going out of his way. I mean, I imagine even what was put out on Sunday had some sort of Mike McCarthy blessing of, representing them, you know what I'm saying, or had some sort of from the Steelers themselves. And what he said today, it seems like that there is some sort of, now, his view from where he's at. Obviously, there's no NFL game film on Will Howard because he hasn't played an NFL game yet, even a preseason game. So, I imagine he's looking to college things like that. And yeah, there's no reason you should. I mean, again, because we haven't seen Will Howard in the game, so there's no reason we should dismiss the idea that he can be part of the discussion, certainly, and part of the answer there. The Rodgers thing is, again, that's a relationship he has with Aaron Rodgers for 20 years now. Again, he's not going to totally poo-poo the idea of him coming back. I mean, there's a lot of layers of that, of course, because Aaron first has to want to come back. I mean, that whole thing. I hope, and I wouldn't think this would last till June this time if there is an idea that he's coming back. To go through that again through that spring, but there's no, as you guys well know, there's not like this clear and easy. Well, there's never really a clear and easy path to finding a franchise star quarterback, but like this year even more so in terms of the draft and just in terms of who might be available or whatever. There's not like that young, there's certain things you can look at and like this option or that option, but it's not like cut and dried, right? So you're probably going to have some veteran on your team, right? It's one way or another. And, obviously with the familiarity, both with the team and with the head coach and everything, there's probably worse routes you can go. Let's put it that way.
Well, staying with that then, Chris, because he was asked about a timeline with Aaron Rodgers too. If you, and again, this all just happened. We're all reacting to it. I forget what his exact answer was, but it was something along the lines of like, I've got to discuss the timeline with Omar Khan and that type of thing, which I'm sure is the truth. I doubt that they've gone real, and they've had these conversations, but they haven't had time yet to go real in the weeds and kind of break down every different possible scenario. You mentioned there, Buzz, with the June last year and Aaron Rodgers. Do you think that there's a chance that door is still open for Aaron Rodgers, but it's not going to be on your terms, you can wait until the middle of the summer to make a decision, because this is my first year with a new organization. We've got to get that quarterback room ironed out. We got to know what we're working with before we get to minicamp, before we get to OTAs. Do you think that there's a chance that they'll keep that door open? They'll Motel 6, leave the light on for Aaron Rodgers, but they might not leave it on well into the summer like they did last year.
I got to be shocked if OTA's open and Rudolph and Howard are the only two quarterbacks. I mean, that's so late in the process,
Yeah, and you kind of wonder even this past season even if it seemed, kind of a fait accompli and, whatever, even, Mike Tomlin kind of did the wink and the nod saying to certain people that, I kind of an idea. By the time we got to June, you still wonder if, whatever. So it's all hypothetical, but maybe the organization loved Jackson Dart. Like, oh my God, we're not going to take Jackson Dart because they're, you know what I'm saying? Like that, they're according to the draft, again, maybe there's a name. I just always say Ty Simpson because as everybody's draft board sits now, that seems to be the sweet spot where Burt Round, where the Steelers are picking, would be the guy. But whether it's him or whether it's somebody who climbs up the depth chart or up the draft board or somebody in the second or third round, whatever it might be, if they fall in love with somebody, you would think that they would still take him, right? Because there is two. I talked with Tom today on the Blitz about finding there's a quarterback you need for 2026 and there's a quarterback you need for your future, and they can be the same person in theory, or they could be two different people. And certainly if one of them is a 42-year-old, he's not going to be the latter of those two, right? That's just simple biology. So and unless it's no matter what, if you go with a young guy, you probably need a bridge guy. Now, I guess you could talk yourself into Mason Rudolph being that guy. I mean, that's possible. But, yeah, it's a long way of saying that I can't, I don't think you need to go into free agency and the draft or the trade market, whatever it is, with a plan and not saying, well, this is the backup and we have Rodgers might come and we'll see it. You got to kind of know, I think, this year. Last year was one thing, maybe a little different circumstances, but now with the new coach and everything. And, hey, Art Rooney was pretty upfront about that. Part of the reason Mike McCarthy was hired was to develop a young quarterback. Now, you're right. Maybe you can punt it 1 year down the road, and that's fine. But at some point here, it's common sense too. You need to get a young quarterback and develop him. So probably the sooner the better for our parties. But again, that's easier said than done, especially when you look at the way the draft board sits right now.
Yeah, Chris, I'm putting it in the spot because I wouldn't expect you to have an answer to this, but any inclination on coordinator hires? He did mention leaning a 3-4 on defense. Wes and I kind of talked about that. I don't know if I'd look too much into that. Is he only in the market for 3-4 guys because the Steelers have run a 3-4 for 50 years? I don't know that makes sense, but you know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he did, he referenced that he's been busy already, which, you expect him to be, and he better have been, the last couple of days earlier. But that's obviously kind of the first priority is assemble the staff top to bottom in that way. So, yeah, I mean, anymore, I feel like something as simple as 3-4-4. I think, up 30 years ago, that was pretty rigid, right? I think now there's so much. World. Yeah, it's just, down to down, play to play, package to package, opponent to opponent, right? I mean, we saw it this year with the Steelers that they, certainly use different personnel game to game or what situation to situation. So I think it's a lot more now where you're getting, your best 11 on the field for this certain situation than you are so much for it. But there is still an element. There's still some players that will fit a lot better in offensively and defensively in certain schemes. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I don't know. One of the reasons I wanted to ask about the play calling is I think that certainly affects the type of coordinator you're going to get, I would think, right? I mean, I wouldn't, maybe I'm wrong, a veteran offensive coordinator probably is not going to want to come and not call the plays, right? That probably, but that's not a bad thing either. I don't think if you get a young, kind of innovative, up-and-coming mind to, have the coordinator title and he kind of learns his way into it. And, I think that could be good for an organization too. So I think at least off of that alone, that's maybe a little bit of a hint on where they might go offensively.
I would really like to see them do that offensively. The quarterback coach or the offensive coordinator be a younger, maybe innovative thinker, maybe someone that isn't directly related to him outside the organization, a totally different way of viewing things that maybe could even be the head coach in 3-4 years here. But on the other side of the ball, I couldn't care less if the defensive coordinator is 35 or 70.
Yeah, I mean, it has that feel, and that's one of the. I wanted to. It's kind of hard to frame the question even, and we seemed like we pretty much only got one question each. But I was curious in that way too. And but Mike did reference that in terms. He pretty much said, paraphrasing here, that when building a staff, you want to have a blend of real experience, hardened guys that have been around and know everything, and also young and hungry and go get them types, up and coming type guys. And I think part of that latter is what you just referenced, is just kind of fresh ideas, new ideas. You're kind of incubating. I mean, you're not expressively doing for them, although I'm sure if you're getting guys hired, that means you're doing a good job. But just sort of the different perspective and that kind of young and hungry type of thing. So yeah, I would kind of, to me, and I guess going back to some of his staffs, it depends on, I guess, how you view some of those guys. Especially if you're going to. In other words, to me, maybe I'm making too much of this, but to be a coordinator and you're not calling the plays, you're probably going to trend more on the younger side, a guy who wants to come in.
Think.
30-something guy who wants to learn under Mike McCarthy, right? I mean, that's got to be pretty appealing if you're a young and ambitious, up and coming and want to be a NFL coordinator, an NFL head coach, an NFL play caller. To be able to work under him for a couple of years, that I think would be. So I think that may be one of the areas where you see that. And yeah, I think offensively, I mean, look at, again, I mean, the Steelers, we know they talked to Nate Shieldhouse, they talked to Akubiak. I think that there is sort of a recognition that, yeah, maybe we're seeing trends. I mean, Mike talked about that a lot too. He talked a lot about trends. That was a big. You could tell he definitely hammered on that, and so he's aware of the trends, and he's aware of some of these. I'm sure he's hyper aware of the offense. He's an offensive guy and aware of the offensive trends. So he knows that, and I'm sure he's going to try to get some of those people thinking along those lines here too.
Great stuff with Chris Adamski. Wow, as Mike McCarthy says, things are moving 100 miles an hour. I did love how he emphasized
guys, the way he said Will Howard was probably the most interesting. And the introduction of a Steelers head coach being from Greenfield and saying Will Howard by Howard was the most Pittsburgh thing I think that might have happened.
I think Myron Cope and Mr. Rogers were high-fiving upstairs when they heard that one. Things are moving 100 miles an hour, according to Mike McCarthy. But we do know that if he is able to win that 7th Lombardi championship for the city, the parade will start at 1137 Greenfield Avenue. I wonder if the people who live there now are like, wait, hold on, wait a second.
Whoa, yeah.
We didn't sign up for that. Are you giving out our address for a Super Bowl party? Chris Adamski of the trip.
Someone's going to be stopping there tonight.
Oh, anyways. Those poor people. It's probably like the Breaking Bad house in Albuquerque.
Yeah.
Like those people, like the year after that episode, they'd like walk outside and there'd be pizza up on their roof all the time. Right. Like those poor people didn't deserve that. Come on, man. Chris Adamski, if he ever wins a Super Bowl for the Pittsburgh Steelers, the parade will start at the Flying Saucer up in downtown Mars, PA. We know that.
Damn right it will.
We know that for sure. Buzz, thanks for taking the time, partner, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Take care, guys. Anytime.
Make sure you're checking out all his work in the Trib, listening to him and Tom on the Blitz every single day. Matt and I have one more segment to go. We'll wrap this thing up. Some reports about some interviews for the Steelers.
Yeah,
and some
league news, and
some other league coaching news too. Let's Matt, let's cross some T's.
Okay.
Dot some I's on the news of the day when we return on the other side to shut down.
You know what I'm going to do tonight too?
What are you going to do tonight?
I'm going to watch 2 Senior Bowl practices.
Ooh, were those live streamed?
I did some old school DVR.
Oh, I get what you're saying.
NFL
Yeah.
Network. I'm sure you can find them.
Well,
on
yeah, because they'd be during the day. That
yeah.
makes sense. Ooh. You know what I had to do tonight?
And I started looking at weigh-ins and stuff too, and hand sizes and arm lengths.
I was going to go back and watch the NFL films on the West Coast offense and Bill Walsh.
No, you should.
Maybe we'll swap notes tomorrow and see what we discover. But we'll go through news of the day, both Steelers staff and NFL coaching moving and shaking when we return to close down the drive for today. Uhler, Williamson, Steelers Nation Radio on the Steelers Audio Network. Every commercial break on the show today has just evolved into Will Howard.
A lot of Will Howard stuff.
They're moving out there, moving 100 miles an hour, 1,000,000 miles an hour. But let's transition here for our final segment because, Matt, while, yesterday and today have been Mike McCarthy, I mean, topic 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7.
Right.
There is still plenty of coaching carousel moving and shaking happening
still
across
3 open jobs too. And,
the National Football League. Still 3 open jobs.
Down to 3, I guess. Bills filled it today.
Bills filled theirs today. We'll get to that. And so and again, we just did some of this. So I know what they say. Hand up. I know what they say happens when you assume.
Mm-hmm.
But does it feel like maybe we could get some Browns and Raiders news soon because maybe they were waiting on Shula and Shieldhouse?
Yeah.
I mean, if not, I don't know what those organizations are doing.
I think Adam Schefter said the other day that he wouldn't be shocked if if everything's filled by the end of day Wednesday. I mean, maybe
close the business tomorrow. COB.
Yeah,
COB Wednesday.
A couple of things happen midday today. Maybe we'll even get something before tomorrow. The Bills are in the books. That only leaves 3 spots: Raiders, Cardinals, Browns. Probably not coincidentally the 3 worst teams that were looking for coaches. I mean, the guys are picking early in the draft. But the inclination I get, which seems to get stronger and stronger, is Kubiak, the offense coordinator for Seattle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
is heavily linked to the Raiders. Heavily linked to the Raiders. And Tom Brady, when he was calling that game,
gushed over it.
Who is a minority owner of the Raiders.
He's got majority owner power, baby.
Exactly. Which, hey, that makes sense. I mean, I'm sure that's a fine fit with Mendoza. He's only been the offense coordinator there for a year, and he was offense coordinator with the Saints. They let him go, but they let everybody go.
Mm-hmm.
So that seems like a link. The other link is LaFleur, the offensive coordinator for the Rams, to Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that would make sense. Familiarity in the division, all that stuff. It's not the most desirable job in the world.
No, it is not.
The Browns looks like they definitely do not want to part ways with Schwartz, defensive coordinator, and Mary Kay Cabot, who's kind of like a Jerry Dulac for the Browns world that has done it forever and is really dialed in. Mentioned Monken. She mentioned Shieldhouse.
Shieldhouse, yeah.
And who was the other offensive guy? I forget who she mentioned.
Okay.
Along with Schwartz, that she thinks it's going to be Schwartz is the head guy, or one of those 3 offensive-minded guys that just totally leave Schwartz alone as the defensive coordinator.
Anthony Lynn, the other one?
Anthony Lynn. That's
Commanders run game coordinator.
And he did do a stint as a head coach for the Chargers. I would think he's the longest shot of those. But I was just putting the pieces together, too. Like, if I'm right on those dominoes falling, Shieldhouse, I would rather be McVay's offensive coordinator with the Rams than the head guy with the Browns and have no say on the defense. I mean, think about your stock.
That's an interesting point you
don't call
there.
Yeah, you don't call plays, but you're with one of the best organizations that's going to win, as opposed to the mess in Cleveland. He could be Ben Johnson hot a year from now.
No doubt. But okay, let me play devil's advocate then.
Yeah.
Let me sit on the other shoulder. If you're Shieldhouse and you're looking at it, could you be saying the Browns have had a top 3, top 5 defense almost every year? If I can go there and just make the offense decent, we'll be all right.
There's just no pieces in place on offense. I mean, very, very few. And that's the organization's tough to work for because they just don't keep you that long.
Speaking like you've got some personal experience there.
But if that were to be the case, are any of those guys better on the offensive side of the ball than Stefanski? I mean, Stefanski's pretty good offensive. You know what I mean? Like, did you get any better if that's
probably not
how you're
just spinning wheels
a little bit? And I kind of feel like that's what's happening in Buffalo too. Like, okay, so they bump up Brady.
Joe Brady, for those who don't know yet, Joe Brady is the head coach. He was the offensive coordinator under McDermott. Now he's the head coach. 5-year deal announced today.
And he did some good things taking over. Like, I was really harsh on the Bills for years, basically until Brady came over. Like, don't you realize you play in Buffalo? You need to run the football. You know, you can't just throw all over the place. You're trying, all you do is to worry about beating the Chiefs. And he installed a lot of 6-0 line stuff, big blocking tight ends, developed one of the best running games in the league. It's not a big back, but Josh Allen's your big back. So he has done good things. But part of me just kind of felt like, is this just making Josh happy? And say what you want about McDermott, but he was a really good defensive mind. So if Brady, because now he's in charge of the whole team instead of the offense, loses 20 or 25% of his offensive influence or time, and you got to go hire a defensive coordinator that probably won't be as good as McDermott, did you get any better?
You just kind of spun your wheels.
The pressure's on to win now. You got to win the Super Bowl next year. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And the other weird thing about it is McDermott, like a Tomlin or somebody that's been around for a long time, probably had a lot of say in terms of picking players.
Absolutely.
I mean, you've been there long enough. I'm sure Brady doesn't and won't and didn't or won't. And that just gives more power to the GM of who I would have moved away from to begin with. I don't know. I mean, I don't think a lot of Bills fans are thrilled with how it went. I know they're not.
They are not.
You know,
they certainly are not. In fact, and I know I've told you this before, I think I've even shared this on the air, like one of my best friends from college is from Buffalo.
Okay.
Massive Bills fan, and I talked to him on the phone this afternoon, and he was none too pleased.
I bet.
You mentioned Brian Daboll there a few minutes ago, set to take the offensive coordinator job for the Titans under Robert Saleh. I love it, particularly for Cam Ward and what we saw Daboll and what he was able to do with Josh Allen.
Yeah.
My goodness, if I'm Cam Ward, I'm doing backflips right now. I think this is outstanding.
Yeah, and I do think Daboll probably gets more credit than he deserves with Allen.
Sure.
But don't forget, Allen was a train wreck to begin with. But also, a lot of what Allen did, I think, was away from the facility with his own mechanics.
Quarterback, mechanics, coach, yeah.
But still, and Daboll didn't get a ton out of Daniel Jones with the Giants. Still, he's a very widely regarded quarterback developer, offensive mind, big personality. I think Robert Saleh won't be intimidated by, being around Daboll, who's pretty rough around the edges and all those things. But I think it's great for Ward. A lot of credibility in the building. Obviously, the head coach is going to deal with the defense. Daboll's going to deal with the offense. I think Tennessee did pretty well.
If I'm a Titans fan and I'm looking where we're at, again, the verdict is still out on Robert Saleh, the head coach.
Yeah.
But I think he deserves a grain of salt because of the struggling organization that he was with as a head coach previously.
Yes.
And I think there's no doubt that he knows how to get the most out of his defenses.
Yes,
so
exactly. Right.
When you look at what you have in the trenches on that defense and in your head coach now, and then you look to the offensive side of the things and you think, all right, we've got some pieces on the offensive line. We've got the young quarterback. Now we've got a respected offensive mind. Like I think
Tennessee,
a ton
of cap space. And,
I was gonna say you hit on a couple free agents. You hit on a couple draft picks. And I'm not saying they're going to win the division, but they could win 7, 8, 9 games next year.
Yeah, and maybe the year after they do win the division.
Right.
Or,
maybe in December they're playing important football still, type of thing.
I don't think that's crazy. You don't have to squint too hard for that.
Of all the dreadfully, woefully terrible teams last year, they're the one that I think has the quickest chance to turn it around.
Yeah, and I'm just a big Cam Ward believer.
Same.
It has a lot to do with it, right?
A couple more, Matt. Commanders finalizing a deal to hire Durante Jones as defensive coordinator. He was the Minnesota Vikings defensive backs coach since 2022.
Okay. Those are ones that are almost impossible.
Oh, they're so tough to evaluate and comment on.
He might be the best. He might be the worst. I don't know.
The Jets also parting ways with their offensive coordinator, Tanner Engstrand.
Yeah.
Which
nothing went great for the Jets last year, but okay. I'm sure the owner wanted some heads to roll if he was going to bring back, the head coach after a year.
Yes. I mean, and that's
my hunch. I don't know.
It's like a Bane, Dark Knight Returns. I expect one of us in the wreckage, brother. Like someone's got to go down with the ship. All right.
Yeah.
Matt, we will discuss these more tomorrow, and I want to do a little more homework on these guys too for tomorrow. But a couple reports of Steelers-related interviewees, okay?
Oh, I've only heard of one.
Cowboys tight ends coach Lunda Wells expected to interview for the Steelers offensive coordinator job. He, of course, worked under Mike McCarthy there on the Dallas staff for 5 years.
He was an O-lineman as a player and got a lot out of okay, talented tight ends. Terrence Ferguson's not the most talented guy out there,
And then the Steelers will also, it's being reported by Mark Cabali, will interview Jason Simmons for the defensive coordinator position. Current pass game defensive coordinator for the Washington Commanders. Coached with Mike McCarthy in Green Bay for 8 years.
Don't know anything about him. Okay.
So again, that's why I want to say I want to do more home. I'm going to do more
defensive coordinator.
Yes.
Interview. Okay.
Yes. So like I said, I want to do more homework on these guys and their backgrounds and all that stuff too, but just wanted to go ahead and make sure and mention those here today. And then finally, Steelers outside linebackers coach Denzel Martin. We've talked about him in the past. I think you've heard me rave about him. He's one of my favorite guys on that staff to just be around. At training camp and on the road and stuff. I just think he's a good dude. I think he's a good coach. I think he's one of those guys that you want in the room. He has been the Cowboys have requested to interview them. Interview him. So obviously we know a lot of these, Danny Smith taking the Tampa Bay job. Right. Some of these coaches that were on the Steelers staff that we'll be keeping an eye on too. Sounds like rightfully so when you look at the TJ Watts and Alex Highsmiths and Herbigs that he's developed, that he's going to get some interviews this offseason.
I can see why he'd get attention.
Yeah. So that's kind of just.
And folks, I've prefaced this before. I mean, when we start talking about position coaches to coordinator hires, I'm not going to have a ton of insight.
Yes.
I'll do the best. But
We'll do the best we can. We'll do some more research on some of these guys tonight, and we'll have some more news by the time we get back here tomorrow. But that will do it for us today. Thanks to Chris Adamski for joining us. Thanks to Nate Dogg on the ones and twos producing, TV, Mr. Tyler V on the video side of things. For Matt Williamson, I'm Wes Uhler. Take care, everybody, and we will talk to you tomorrow. As always, you know where to find us. It's on your 24/7 home of the black and gold, Steelers Nation Radio on the Steelers Audio Network.